本当？見えないでしょ？どこにいるのかな？見えないよ。What's good, Internet? It's Friday, July 31st, and you're listening to Waypoint Radio, episode 332. I'm your host, Austin Walker. Joining me today, Rob Zachney, back on the cast.
Hello, hello.
Also joining me, Gita Jackson.
Hi, it's Gita.
Hi, Gita. How you doing?
I've been better, but man, I've been listening to that Big Thief album that came out months ago, finally. That
How's
shit
that going
whips.
for you?
That
Yeah,
shit's
it's good.
so good. Not? That song, Not. Have you seen, I got obsessed with the KEXP, which is a radio station in Seattle. Has
that
some
does
excellent live
incredible,
performances.
incredible live performances, yes.
Yeah, but they're, I haven't watched their KEXP yet, but the live from Bunker Studios, the performance of Not, I'll send that to you after because,
Please.
Truly, it is so emotional, so beautiful, and the guitar solo at the end is just crazy.
So speaking of things we're getting deep into, I'm just going to say it. Gita, you got me hooked on Blaseball.
Yes!
It's bad. It's bad news. I have a message for all New York Millennials fans out there who are listening to the podcast. I need you by the end of the season to vote for Soul Swap. I need you to.
Yes.
I've conferred with the other New York Millennials in the Discord. This is not a joke. We decided what we're going to do is we're going to put our votes into Soul Swap, which says they won't stop screaming, randomizes your team's 5 worst players. I think they're screaming because they're happy.
Yes.
So please just go for it. It's going to be fine. And then I think of the decrees, I think Peanuts. I think Peanuts is the one that I think is the best. Rob, I'm sorry to dump all this Blaseball on you. I'm sure as a real sports aficionado, this feels like sacrilege.
No, I mean, I was briefly into it, but then I got sidetracked by Korean baseball one morning.
Okay.
Oh man, I gotta watch Korean baseball. We've been watching the sort of truncated weird season, and aside from the whole Joe Kelly incident with the Astros, which was hilarious. I'm a Dodgers wife essentially. David took me to a Dodgers game where I met Rob Zachney. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah, we met in the parking lot attempting to leave.
It was exquisitely awkward.
That's very funny.
So weird.
That's very good.
I really had no idea who you are. If I had known you were as delightful of a human being, I would have been so much more enthusiastic about it. But I was like, I know you from on the internet? That's how I know you? Anyway, there's an incident. Joe Kelly, basically almost hit a guy. The Astros were cheating. In 2 different times when they knocked Joe Kelly's different teams out of the thing at the end,
The playoffs.
The playoffs. The
there you go.
postseason.
Yeah, he was on the Red Sox and then the Dodgers, and the Astros cheating beat both of them. Joe Kelly almost hit an Astro, and then when he was walking off, he just mouthed, "Nice swing, bitch." I need to bring that energy to my life.
To your life, yeah. Rob,
Yeah.
wait, what's up with Korean baseball?
It's just good.
Okay.
So there's
yeah.
there's 2 things about Korean baseball that I'm really into. One is, what if a baseball broadcast was just a podcast where there's a game happening in the background.
This sounds
but
great.
It's announcers checking in with their buddies on the phone and being like, "So how you doing? How you handling this whole coronavirus thing? Oh man, your dad's sick. Oh, that sucks. How's he coming through?" But then also lots of just shooting the shit about general baseball topics. Dudes talking about the culture shock leaving MLB and going and playing in Korean baseball. And how you get your own translator to basically ride shotgun with you through life and help you figure your shit out. But here's the thing I really like about Korean baseball. It's not as good. The players aren't as good. They're not bad, but the play is just a little bit looser in ways that you're oh, baseball is one of those games where probably the level of play has gotten so exceptional that dynamics that were probably there, 100 years ago kind of vanish, right? Fielding errors are much more shocking when they happen.
Right.
But in Korean baseball, you will see some shit that's things that probably in pro ball would have been rounded up for a out at first in the infield will just take like wicked bounces, and you'll see everyone completely flat-footed by it, and the game throws into chaos. So it just turns into a way less. You know how sometimes you watch baseball and it's like you're just kind of waiting for everything to go through the motions because the outcome is so predictable of an at-bat, or the minute you hear contact on the ball, you're like, that's not going anywhere, or that's going to be a double. And it just is. Yeah. Korean baseball, I don't know what's going to happen.
There's a little more play in the play, is what you're saying?
Yeah, it's amazing how being 10% shittier can just make things more exciting.
Well, this, I think, is a big part of why people love college sports, right? It's like there is a little bit more excitement, there's a little bit less predictability, and also just like, it turns out that having players who just like have other things going on in their lives besides being a sports person, sometimes you do the stupid thing. You call the wrong play, you wind up in the wrong place, and chaos ensues. Speaking of chaos ensuing, it looks like the Philadelphia Pies have a 69% chance to beat the Sunbeams. Nice. I don't know if I should take that bet. I feel like, looking at the pitchers, I've never cared so much about pitching. That's not true. When I was a kid and was into baseball, I cared a lot about pitching. But
that's how I can tell you were an Anglo kid.
Since then, I've not cared as much about a pitching rotation as I have this week watching Blaseball. People should check it out. I've seen a lot of people be like, "Oh, is it too late to get into it?" And I actually think it's not. I actually think it's like we're ahead of the big push. I think probably a week or two from now is when it'll be like so big that we burn out on it. But right now, having a good time. The postseason for this season starts on Saturday. The New York Millennials are kind of, well, you know what? We've been kind of middling, but I will say we had a lot more wins overnight last night than we did the night before, and I'd say that we're contesting for the top spot in our division. So
I woke up with enough coins to vote for Peanuts 3 times.
Good job. Thank you. Thank you for voting for Peanuts. Did you see that the stats got leaked, the player stats?
No.
They're not leaked. They got hacked is what they did. It's not the same thing as getting leaked, really. They're good. They're so Rob, there's a bunch of fake players on this league. I guess you said you've seen.
Yeah,
Blaseball.
So like they give you stat ratings on like a scale of 5 stars, but you can't get granular detail. You can't sabermetrics Blaseball.
Well, except that it turns out if you dig, you can. So for instance, I can tell you for a fact that the New York Millennials player, what's his name? Schneider Bendy has the highest anti-capitalism score in the game. He has a .99 anti-capitalism, which I think means he steals a lot. That's what I think that score means. Also, anecdotally, I've seen him steal a lot. Whereas, like our one of our best hitters, Dominic Marijuana, who's a 3.5-star player, has like a really low base thirst, which to me, I think based on seeing Dom.
Oh, making good decisions about rounding the bases, maybe?
I think it might just be speed to get to base, because let me tell you, he gets so many ground outs. He hits the ball consistently, but he cannot get on base. And so I think that might be like, all right, do you really want to get on base or not? Like, or are you just a slugger who can't do it? There's buoyancy, no idea what that is. Chasiness, is that the ability to grab a ground ball, maybe? I don't know. Coldness?
I don't know how much I like this.
Continuation? Continuation, to me, is that like a pitching stat or like your performance late in the game? Divinity? Divinity, I've lost it. I have no idea.
Divinity is amazing.
Ground friction?
Unthwackability and thwackability.
Both of them. Thwackability has to be... Unthwackability is a pitcher stat. Unthwackability is...
That's got to be like slugging percentage or something.
But
it has to be. Thwackability is slugging, and unthwackability is can you get the ball... it could be that, right.
Tragicness is a beautiful stat. I feel like everyone should look inside themselves for their tragicness stat. But what is Shakespeareanism?
Shakespeareanism, I hope I have a middling Shakespeareanism. I think that's being honest with myself. I don't want a low Shakespeareanism, but I know what happens with a high Shakespeareanism. Shout out to my friend Michael. Ruthlessness.
Fucking King Lear.
Ruthlessness is definitely the this is how I win score, right? That's the you're up and you still want to score at the end. I figured out how shaming works also. Shaming is the best thing in Blaseball. Shaming is when, you know how in regular baseball, it comes to the end of a game, and then let's say it's 5-5 going into the bottom of the ninth, and a team scores, and then the game ends because the team that's batting scored, and that means the game is over because you're up now, and the other team doesn't have another chance. Not in Blaseball. In Blaseball, the game continues, and you shame the other team as maybe you continue to rack up points and make them look like shit. They have to get 3 outs to close off the game. And
that
so
should be real.
That's
in
amazing.
real
it's
baseball,
amazing.
honestly.
Let me tell you, the Blaseball Discord goes wild when a team gets shamed.
I just joined because you've been talking about it so much. I feel like it's going to make Blaseball like 20% more fun. It's already fun.
It's very fun when it comes to the end of like a cycle of games, and then everyone in the watch party chat just explodes with joy as like the last game is just like a real nail biter, or like, you know, there's a shame chance, shame on deck. It's very fun. So that's been like the thing that I've been playing this week that's brought me the most joy, which probably sounds rude to the other video games I've been playing. Though also, I want to shout out really quick. I think I only realized late. The team behind this, I had to dig a little bit. This is made by a group called The Game Band, who made this kind of like puzzle adventure game that came out on Apple Arcade last year called Where Cards Fall, which is this very like quaint, cute, like game about cards, like houses that you navigate between with cards as like the puzzle interface. So you're kind of like sliding things around. I think I played it at an E3 event like 2 years ago, and it's so the opposite thing of Blaseball. It's so like, you know, oh, this is kind of a twee, charming puzzle adventure game, and now this is compared to Blaseball, which is this like weird, almost ARG looking thing that wants to hide its design elements, versus this thing that like was trying its best to be as not straightforward, but as clear and precise with how its mechanics worked, for instance, as possible. I think it's very interesting that they took this direction. I think it's a really neat thing to be like, all right, let's just do the opposite thing of what we just did. So shout outs to the Game Band, shout outs to Blaseball for giving me some joy. I'm going to close this window now, or else I'm just going to end up following the next games that happen. So what have y'all been up to? Y'all been playing anything you wanna talk about? Is it time,
I
Rob?
gotta get some bets in.
Oh my fucking god!
Look, this is
He's
what
back,
happened.
baby.
I was off this game for like 2 days, and then I was like, "Hey, did they ever open that Forbidden Book?"
Oh, they did.
Oh, they
They fucking did.
Okay, so catch me up. What
That's
happened
why
with the Forbidden Book?
You should open up the book and see why it says
the
things.
book.
The book is
Oh,
there.
it's a redacted rulebook?
Yes. Should the participants open the Forbidden Book, redacted, suffering, redacted, banished, redacted, shall last until redacted. So, if a team wins 3 championships, they and Blaseball shall ascend. So I think that's a win condition. Anyway, Rob, yes, the thing I told my friend Art the other day was that I'm playing this game like it's a legacy game. Like, I just want to open up all the little envelopes. I just want all of the things to happen, and I want to see all the mechanics. So yeah, it's advancing. I'm so glad we got you back. I'm so glad you're back in it. Wait, we don't know what your team is.
I'm pretty sure I chose the Millennials. I might have chosen Chicago, though. Fuck.
That's fine.
Did I choose the Firefighters?
The Firefighters are all right. Last night in the Discord we did like I was like, wait a second, has anyone just totaled up the stars? Because it's one thing to look at these records and look at like the Dallas Stakes are 51-17. They clearly have the best record in the league. But their actual star stats just aren't that good. It's that league has some of the weakest teams in it. The Kansas City Breath Mints, the San Francisco Lovers, the Los Angeles Tacos, and I want to say the Firefighters. And the Firefighters might be okay, actually. But it's like a few of the worst teams in the game are in that division. So the Stakes, who are only kind of a middling team, I mean, they're like better than most, but they're not at the top. They're not like in the top 5 in terms of pure stats. Are nevertheless have the best record in the league because they're in such a harsh or such a polarized division. Whereas like the Millennials division is really tight, and none of us have a good score because all of us are around each other in total star points. So, you know, the Hades Tigers are clearly the best team in the game. They have 37 stars, which is 3 stars more than their nearest competitor, which is the Boston Flowers. I think the fact that you see someone like the Charleston Shoe Thieves doing so well, despite having less points than many other teams on the field is pretty remarkable. So shout outs to the Charleston Shoe Thieves. I always bet Shoe Thieves, even though I happily shamed them the other night. I did that. That was me. It's sports, which means that when my team wins, I've won. I did it. Especially here in this pretend video game sport where literally there's zero interaction. I'm not even a fan in the crowds clapping. No, I guess that's not true. Who knows what weird interactive elements might exist theoretically. I guess, like I said, we're going to vote for Soul Steal or whatever, Soul Swap, and that's going to help our team get better. So there is some degree of interaction, but regardless, I'm glad we have you back. Rob, did you make your bets?
Yeah.
Okay.
I will now pay attention to y'all and not the items in the shop with prices and detailed descriptions. There's more in the shop now.
There's more in the shop.
There's more shit.
Ooh, a fair weather
vote for
flute.
peanuts.
A fair weather flute. You could save up
Only
2,000
if you wanted,
coins.
I mean, it's 2,000 coins to be a fair weather fan, Rob. Are you going to do that? Are you going to be a bandwagoner?
I could join with the millennials. I could be with y'all.
Wait, are you in Chicago now is where you are?
Yeah.
Yeah. Listen,
But, no, you got to suffer with Chicago sports.
You gotta get through a
No matter
season.
what
Listen,
format,
yes.
you just have to.
I feel like get through a
do.
season, and then you can let yourself decide if you want to switch sides, or just set a Smurf account up and start smurfing Blaseball.
Oh my god.
That's not a thing. It doesn't make any sense.
So I guess speaking of pretend sports, I've started playing a bit of F1 2020,
Okay.
which is why I'm sitting in a weird position today.
But isn't that a real sport? Hasn't that been a real sport in the last year?
Well, okay, yes, but the video game version of it bears no resemblance to what is happening this year. So there's a few interesting things about F1 2020. First of all, the F1 the actual F1 season this year was, like everything, completely blown out of the water by coronavirus. Like literally, they had the teams in Australia for the first race of the season, and like a day before they were supposed to go racing, somebody on one of the teams tested positive for COVID-19, and everyone was like, "This is a wrap." Like at that point, there were a lot of infections in Melbourne where they race, so they just canceled the race, and then they were like, "Where can we race next?" And the answer at that point was nowhere. So everything went into the hiatus. They postponed a bunch of their races. Those have since been canceled. But the F1 2020 game has the season that was intended to be raced. But where things get even weirder is that in the real world, the 2020 season, now that they are racing again, now that F1 is happening again, has actually become really interesting because they are racing at all these circuits that you never see in the actual F1 season. Little background, F1 is a sport that basically can be run like a racket in some ways, and they would just soak places for hosting fees, basically. Like race promoters would pay a fortune for F1 to come and put on a race at their venue. So where 20 years ago F1 was really Eurocentric, and then F1 basically went to car countries where there's a major auto industry or just a major passion for motors. In the last 20 years, it started broadening its base, going to a lot of what people were calling developing economies and such. And
so that they could prey on local race promoters there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, so what you would have, for instance, is the government of Malaysia would support an F1 race to both boost the country's prestige, and whether it lost money or not, the country was making a fortune on, I think, oil money at the time, so it didn't really matter as much. But all of that came at the cost of a lot of the classic tracks that F1 used to run at. Now they're kind of trapped in Europe, And so what they've been doing, because they can't travel to the Americas, they can't travel to Asia. So what they've been doing is they've started seeing, like, okay, who else can actually run an F1 race these days? And so they've started dusting off a lot of these, like, really interesting tracks that we haven't seen in years in F1. So they're racing at Portugal soon. They're racing at the Italian circuit, Imola, which is really famous. They're going back there for the first time in ages, which is awesome. It's cool to see, like, oh, this is something we would never have seen in F1. It's neat we're seeing these venues. Those venues certainly do not exist in F1 2020 because obviously they were sort of ad hoc placed on the schedule. And so F1 2020 like takes place in this alternate world where the season went off without a hitch. And I am surprised how much it is kind of bumming me out that it doesn't seem like there's any plans to support a version that, like, okay, we'll actually put the real race calendar into F1 2020. That would certainly be a lot of work because there's a lot of tracks they just never built and they never like assembled reference material for. But like I would like kill to be able to race at Ferrari's test track at Mugello, in F1 2020. The other thing they rolled out this year was a franchise mode. They've always done stuff where as driver you could direct the development of your racing team, but this year they're allowing you to create your own team and basically do a motorsports manager type thing inside of F1 2020, and it doesn't really it doesn't compare to Motorsport Manager for sure, but it is very funny seeing how this game represents the business of running an F1 team. And so one of the things you do is you do the usual, like, choose your sponsors, what bonuses are associated with them, what performance goals you have to meet. You give interviews, and if you like talk shit about the chassis development department gets sad, and they are more likely to fuck up on the next parts development that you commission. But it's also very funny because basically they're trying to they try to turn F1 into this thing where they take the recognizable brands, but each of them is standing in for, to some degree, like a game concept, a trade-off. So like you can choose the Honda engines, and they're the cheapest, and they're the least reliable, and their power is decent, but that does reflect the fact that Honda's kind of new in the sport. Or you can spend the most money and buy the Ferrari engines, which are the most powerful and the most durable, but they're just the most expensive. That's very funny. That's a very funny choice, though, because Ferrari by far has the worst engines this year, and they only had good engines because it turns out they may have been cheating last year, and they got caught.
Yes.
And
but is
F1,
this like the name prestige means in the video game world, they're the best ones. They're Ferrari.
Yeah, and I think also the game might be drawing some of its conclusions from like the weird boost in power the Ferrari engine got until the governing body was like. So F1 it's super political, and a lot of stuff happens a little bit under the table. So for a few months there, Ferrari suddenly started putting out like crazy power with their engine. Like they were the fastest car in a straight line on the track, and it was like Ferrari has figured the shit out. They're kicking ass. And then I think right as they were about to run their race in the US, F1, the governing body, was forced to issue a clarification about fuel sensors. And one of the other teams had basically asked, hey, just out of curiosity, are you allowed to only send a certain amount of fuel through the fuel injection system timed with when the sensor is taking data? And then when the sensor's not taking data, you can do whatever you want. And F1 was like, no, you can't do that. But what that reflected was people had figured out that what Ferrari seemed to have been doing was you're limited in how much fuel you can send to the engine F1 the sensor takes like 3,600 readings per, I think per minute, maybe per second, in F1, and they had timed it so they were sending more fuel through when the sensor wasn't reading.
Like so sneaking it through the propeller almost, right?
Yes.
Like sneaking it past. That's incredible.
Yeah, and so that's why
that's like an incredible feat of engineering, probably, but also that's cheating.
Yes, it's unreal. Like the fact that somebody figured out how you can do this astounds me. Like I just can't imagine the precision to like in those little windows flood the engine with fuel, and then when the sensor's like coming back like literally nanoseconds later,
right,
it's
like a mission impossible of a feat of engineering, right? Like this is how you get Ethan Hunt into the vault. You have to flood the engine timed, every 1/2 second for 3, or every, God, it's even more than that's unbelievable.
This is so much cooler than the Astros cheating, I have to say.
Yeah, the Astros cheating. Bang, bang, bang. For people who don't remember, the Astros had a system where they were telling the hitters what the pitch was going to be by hitting the top of a trash can with a stick, basically, to communicate different calls.
No,
and
my favorite is when they did come up with like a dumb high-tech solution, which was like having like a microphone underneath the thing.
Right,
and
but
then the player that like was known for taking off his shirt after hitting home runs was like refusing to let other people remove his shirt for him. Afterward,
I have a really big. I feel bad about my body today. I'm just gonna chill.
Yeah, he was like, I'm shy.
Me as a baseball player.
Man, I missed that part entirely. So like basically a dude was wired and was doing the like crime movie thing where like, hey, I need to see.
Don't touch me.
That's so good.
That is great.
It was amazing.
Oh, that's so. That's
the best Twitter account right now is Astros Shame Tour 2020. Go follow it.
God.
But yeah, so it's very funny that F1 2020 just exists in this world where like the things that we thought at some point last season remain true, which is that F1 will look a certain way in 2020, and also that like Ferrari, they have the best engine, definitely by far. What a great engine Ferrari makes, and this year like Ferrari is noticeably like it is, the comparison is like they're running a lawnmower engine while everyone else is running a race car engine.
Right,
it's that bad.
But all this makes me recall like all the conversations we've had, pieces like Nick Capizoli's on the NFL, on the Madden games, and the things that are kind of extricated from sports video games that exist in sport, including cheating, racism, the fact that there are labor struggles, like all of the things that actually embody the breadth of what sport is as a professional enterprise, that games cannot include injury, like serious life-threatening injuries, or technologies needing to be invented to try to reduce the threat of injuries, all sorts of scandals, right? A game, especially in today's game space where you do have a franchise mode or a campaign mode or like a player embodiment mode in team sports games where you're like, all right, I'm going to play this quarterback. And they want as much of the simulation or the kind of, they want to immerse you in many things that are off the field, right? They want you to care about fashion. They want you to care about a fake Twitter. They want you to care about even, this character is like your agent and da-da-da-da-da-da. And I guess in some cases you get some of that stuff in the story modes. I know that the FIFA story mode definitely had some like, off the field scandals or betrayals or, like that stuff happens in story modes in games. But there are so many things that just because of the importance of maintaining the license and maintaining the integrity of the brand, you're not going to get what really happens in sports, and instead you're going to always get this sort of plastic version of the game, because it is a promotional tool, most of all.
Yeah. For example, you're never gonna see a moment like Joe Kelly almost hitting a guy with a ball in a baseball in MLB The Show, right?
You can beat people in that game, right? But you can't.
Yeah, but it's not going to be it'll be a thing where you are bringing your knowledge of that rivalry to the game. They're dependent on you being such a big fan of baseball that you will enact these rivalries. The rivalry that clearly exists between Joe Kelly specifically and every Astro that exists in the world is not going to be there. That's something, a meta game that they kind of refuse to acknowledge exists. Joe Kelly is clearly playing a different baseball game against the Astros than he is against any other team. Also, he was suspended for 8 games, which is effectively the rest of the season, which is hilarious.
What season this year? Sports video games are basically just promotional tools for huge exploitative industries. Also, have y'all seen the new FIFA 2021 cover art? It's sick.
Yo, I have not, though.
It's so sick.
Yo!
They decided to make all of the new EA Sports covers
That's amazing.
Actually sick as shit.
Fuck, I'm gonna buy this shit.
For people who can't see it,
Criterion presents.
Yeah, it's. I guess this is the Ultimate Edition art. But even the regular one is still a step up from just like sports guy screaming. I mean, listen, I'll be honest. Sports guy is still screaming. Here he is. This is him. But around him is at least some stuff going on here. It's Kylian Mbappe, who is a French player. And on the Ultimate Edition of the game, it's just like a sick black and white photo of him walking and like just dripped out of his mind. And it just says Ultimate Edition in kind of an empty, like a neutral space or just like an outline of a font. It's just very.
I hate how much I want this.
It's so relaxed. It's so good. I need
a poster of this. Like it's just black excellence in a little.
Yep.
I mean my other thought was this could be an advertisement for Supreme, but that is essentially the that's the
vibe that they're
aesthetic,
going for.
Right? You know,
100%.
It's not bad. It's acknowledging how the world is and how people play and think about sports and think about people who play sports.
Yeah, I would love
Madden 21 I saw, and I thought that black and white photo of Lamar Jacobson is just gorgeous. His skin looks amazing.
They did a good job shooting him, which is again not normally you just get sports mode, and it's cool to get a slightly different vibe. I would love the games to feel like this in some ways. I would love that move. But also,
where's my black and white photo of Andy Reid though? That's the cover I want.
Yeah,
just like Andy Reid, like staring at the X's and O's or something like that. Just a big friendly walrus mustache. Give me that cover.
Yeah, well, now I'm looking at real black and white photos of Andy Reid, including one in which this is from forever ago, but it's fantastic. This is young Andy Reid kneeling next to a helmet that looks like it has the Yahoo Y on it. I'm sure that's not what it is.
Perfect.
I'm sure that's from some college team. I don't know what.
No, it's Yahoo.
It's Yahoo, the Yahoo Sports team. That's the newest Blaseball team. The Yahoo football players. Why are they playing Blaseball now? Who could say? Oh, God. Well, Rob, thank you for the F1 update. I'm glad that at the very least you have video game F1 to keep you going. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back, and then Gita, you can give me an update on what else you're getting into.
Will do.
All right, so the thing about long-term quarantine, staying home, this COVID world that we live in, is we're all at home. It's real easy to just be like, what are showers? What is smelling good? And if you're like me, you might be at home with a long-term partner, maybe a roommate, whatever the case may be. It might have been for a little while. They're like, hey, we're just going to let that slide. Like, it's cool. We're all, in the same boat. And over time, maybe as a treat, you want to smell like a little nicer. But like, hey, let's pretend we're going on a date as we go to the family room for the 90th day in a row during all this. And that's why something like Hawthorne is really important. That's why Hawthorne can be the solution to this issue. If you're not sure, well, one, you don't want to go out of the house, right? And so Hawthorne, online, they have an easy quiz. They can hook you up with, do you want to smell better? Do you need some face cleanser? Need some extra deodorant? You just go their quiz, and the quiz is great. because if you're like me, and I've mentioned this before, we're talking about Hawthorne, picking things out is just I don't like doing it. Like, I'm very much like, hey, go to this website, tell me what the good thing is, and I'll buy that. And that just doesn't really work with bodies because all of us are so different. And so they have this really easy quiz. It only takes a couple of minutes to take. They ask, just a couple of questions about, like, what does your main face need? What is your hair type? How often do you shower? How long is your hair? They're like really easy questions that even someone like me could answer, which means someone like you can answer them as well. And when I did the quiz, months and months back, they sent me everything I needed to smell great, to look great. I still use the shampoo, conditioner. I still use the cologne when my wife and I pretend to have a date night out on the deck. And it's just, if you're looking, whether it's for yourself, your partner, or whoever else you might be quarantining with, like, a Hawthorne is a great way to get a grab bag of things to just make that part of your life, part of your body, just a little bit easier to maintain as we stare down the barrel of doing this for who knows how long. And so if you want to know more about that, you can take the 2-minute quiz over at hawthorne.co. You want to check out Hawthorne at hawthorne.co. And again, it's really easy to confuse that with a .com, but it's a co.co. And use the promo code Waypoint to get 10% off your first purchase. Now, if you order it and it turns out, actually, this is not my thing, I don't want this anymore. Hey, it's free shipping and then free shipping back. Ship, free. That's Hawthorne, HAWTHORNE.co. And use the code Waypoint to get 10% off your purchase. Hawthorne.co.
All right, we are back. How's it going? What have you been up to, Gita?
So, let me give you some backstory and how my brain works, just real quick. I have this learning disability that sounds fake but is real. Mm-hmm. It's called dyscalculia. Mm-hmm. It's dyslexia, but just with numbers. I might actually be also dyslexic. None of these things have actually been diagnosed. I just have always been bad at math, but understand math concepts, essentially.
Okay.
Where stuff like pattern recognition, geometry, I was always very, very good at. I love puzzles that involve understanding, like, how patterns appear and all that stuff. But I've just not... When a number is over a certain amount of digits, like over 5 digits, it doesn't look like anything to me. It looks like a bunch of gibberish. All the numbers look the same. I was told I was lazy very, very much until I Googled all numbers look the same and realized that this is a real thing that happens. So part of that is I've always wanted to understand what Sudoku is, but I've just looked at it and seen a mess of numbers, and it just my brain is not gonna wrap around this. The information is going to bounce off, and I won't be able to get into it, and that sucks. However, yesterday I was solving Sudoku puzzles in under 2 minutes, and that was because Gage came out with a new version of Sudoku called Good Sudoku, and it's great.
And it's good.
Yeah. So Gage is a person who has done variations on word puzzle games and solitaire. He has really bad chess with randomized pieces.
Yeah.
Flip Flop, which is I just grabbed it again. I deleted it off my phone because at a certain point I was like, no more, can't do this.
Yeah.
Flip Flop, which is another great idle thing to do with your thumbs, which is solitaire but with expanded rules.
Right. Spell Tower, which I meant to mention this when it first dropped, but there was a new re-release of Spell Tower on iOS and Android called Spell Tower Plus. I think it was on Android too. Maybe it's only on iOS. Last year, and Spell Tower was one of the first incredible word games on iOS. It was one of the earliest. Oh wow, this platform totally works for games in a really cool way. So yeah, Zach's been killing it since forever.
And these are games that, even though you will have to pay to unlock some features, they are not littered with ads. They look beautiful on your phone.
Right.
They just really, really look good. And that enhances the experience of playing Sudoku on your phone so much. In the little introduction to Good Sudoku, he says him and I think Schlesinger is the other person who made this game with him. He says they got really into Sudoku, like pen and paper, and then tried to find a good Sudoku app so you play on your phone, and discovered quickly that all Sudoku apps just suck. Like, not only are they like ugly to look at and like difficult to play, they don't have good tools for like teaching you how to be a better player or helping people understand the game if they haven't played before. So not only is like good Sudoku just like a Sudoku app that is easier to play, like for instance has an automatic note-taking feature, so it will mark all the number possibilities for you if you don't want to just go through and like look at every single square and like fuck that up on your own, which I appreciate because again, all numbers look the fucking same to me.
Yeah.
It will teach you like the core concepts of Sudoku. And I now understand this puzzle game like a whole lot better than I did when I was just trying to learn it on my own. Like the concept of Sudoku is something, if you play Picross, it like probably will like click in your brain a little bit. It's a grid of 9 by 9 squares that each have 9 squares in them. Every row, column, and house, so those are the squares, must contain the digits 1 through 9, and each row, column, and house cannot have more than one of each digit in it. So you get these sheets that essentially have some of the numbers filled out, and your job is to fill out the rest of them. When it's easy, it can be really, really easy. And in fact, some of the beginner modes of good Sudoku have a little bit of a press X to win feel to them sometimes because of the tools it gives you to speed up the process. So if you have taken accurate notes in good Sudoku or use the automatic note-taking feature, it also has a feature that will complete houses once it sees like what numbers can go in a house. If there's only one possibility for where an 8 can go, it'll just plop that in. And a lot of the time when you get to that place where there's only one possibility left, it's kind of like dominoes where put the 8 in and then the 7 falls in, and the 4 falls in, and then the house is completed. And then the game can just sort of make intuitions based on that to like understand where the rest of the numbers go. And I felt like I wasn't truly understanding the concepts, but it did empower me, like just by being able to look at the numbers and having accurate note taking that wasn't based on my own faulty eyeballs, like to see how quickly you can solve these puzzles once you get the core concept. I did a puzzle in like a minute with the mode.
Gita, when I look at a Sudoku table, to me, it's like the only thing I can think I would be doing would be like, okay, this number can't go here, can't go there, and I would just be doing that until I slowly lose my mind, just sort of counting where things can go and how it all fit together. And so to me, like that's basically the only way I would know how to play. What are some other approaches that are out there? Like, what is the next level of like, oh, here is a process by which I can solve this shit?
Well, Rob, what I'm discovering, because it gives you some little lessons on concepts of Sudoku to figure out how to recognize patterns, what I'm learning essentially is that this is a game that is about the part of math that I am good at, which is pattern recognition and like understanding based on available information, like the process of elimination stuff, but also using those options that look opaque and like using the numbers that appear to actually place the others. It will gives you some lessons. Some of these concepts are really goofy sounding, like if there's only one 5 in a house, row, or column, then that's called a hidden pair, and that's like a hidden single actually. And in my head, I just kept thinking living single every time I found one of those. And for some reason, if you're in a row or in a house, there's in one row or column, there's only a place where 2 numbers can be, like a 4 and 7. That's called it's called a naked pair, which makes me laugh every time.
Great anime, naked pair, fantastic 80s. They get all sorts of hijinks. Yeah,
so it teaches you not just like a more standardized version to do the thing that you were going to be doing anyway, but the way that can lead to actual answers where you know, okay, well, I've eliminated where everything else can be, but I also know where this number can only exist, thus creating a board that makes that has more information on it. A big thing that helps with this is they have this thing that also helps with my dyscalculia called focus mode, where instead of just relying on you to look across the entire board and see where things can't be and to mark that meticulously, you can press a number 1 on your little keypad, and it will show you, it will highlight all the squares that ones are in, and then all the squares that are affected by that. So therefore, it brings into focus the only places where you could put a 1. And that reveals the patterns a lot more easily, because you're essentially having someone just put a highlighter all over the rest of the board and be like, look only here, and you will understand the secret Sudoku knowledge. The goal seems to be eventually leading you up to the place where you can do this on pen and paper, but it's really, really cool. Like, the hint mode is also just like so much better than every other Sudoku app I've used, because it shows you the concept you're missing, and then if you want further hints, it will explain to you how you use that concept to fill out the board.
Like, how the fuck was I supposed to know that? Is the constant thing that happens to me when I'm playing, not just Sudoku, but like if I'm playing Picross, like you said, or a number of other sort of number or word puzzle type games where like that have solutions. Where like I guess I would have gotten there eventually by process of elimination. Going back to what Rob was saying, I could scan like one by one and try to get this. But you're telling me that there's like a faster way to do that, and the fact that that game that Good Sudoku is like, yeah, there is. There's like, here is a way of thinking about the way these numbers show up that will help you recognize a larger pattern inside of the Sudoku puzzle is such a difference from every other Sudoku app I've ever looked at, you know.
And I can measure my like improvement too, which is really exciting. Like, I stayed up way too late last night playing Good Sudoku when I couldn't sleep, and I went from the beginner puzzles. I was like, okay, I know enough about Sudoku that I think I can move on from these. The advanced puzzles were a little bit trickier, but I found that I was having to turn off some of the helper modes in order to make them challenging at all. And at that point, I was like, okay, I could probably do these without the special, help that this game gives you. So I went straight into expert. I went from taking 20 minutes to solve an expert puzzle to taking 5 to 7 minutes to solve an expert puzzle. And I was using much fewer hints, and I could tell that I was recognizing some of these, the naked pairs, splits, and all the pointing triples. I was recognizing them without the game telling me where they were. And there is some AI built into this where it will tell you also if you've completed a certain amount of puzzles that contain a particular concept without using hints to point them out to you. So it shows you your own mastery of these concepts over time as well. It makes you feel really smart, as opposed to a lot of Sudoku apps, which make you feel really freaking stupid. Totally.
I played a bunch of, what's it called? Murder by Numbers, I think is the name of the game that came out this past year.
Yes.
And I wish it had some of the learning techniques in Good Sudoku, because that game is really cool. And I found myself learning. I did find myself learning certain types of techniques, like the hidden single, the thing of if you have a bunch of things in a row that all have the same basic numbers that are or have a bunch of different things, but only in one square. It's the only time a certain number shows up. That's the one. I learned that technique from playing that game, but not because it taught me that technique. It was just a thing I picked up along the way. And I wish that it would have had this style of technique teaching, because it would have made that game a lot more enjoyable. I probably would have stuck it out. As it is, I only got into the second case and moved on. But maybe with some time with Good Sudoku, I'll end up going back and just blowing through all of Murder by Numbers, because that game had a great atmosphere. It just also was just Sudoku over and over again. So yeah, Good Sudoku, Zach Gage, shout outs as always. Anyone else want to bring something to the table? I have a question for Rob, but it's going to be the very, very end. And Gita, you already know this question because you answered it last week. But Rob, if you want to relitigate something, now is the time, I think.
No, I'm happy to.
Oh, okay. You're gonna punt now. You're not gonna bring it to the table.
I mean, I can bring it up, but I also feel like, would Patrick want to be in on that conversation about Alien Isolation?
I think no, which is why we should wait until Patrick is on to have the conversation. You see?
Yeah.
I think he's dodging
spitefully
it.
wait for him.
Yeah, exactly.
He tried to duck it. He's like,
I'm gonna get out of here.
Kids, man.
I can't do this. I gotta do work, video game reporter stuff. You know how it is. No, Patrick, we're gonna wait for you. Well, let me do like we're gonna save Alien Isolation and revisit, and that's good because maybe I'll put some more time into it before we revisit it. We'll see. But I did play Carrion, which I said last week or on Monday that I was going to talk about a little bit. And that is like the opposite of Alien Isolation, or it's like the inverse of Alien Isolation, in that you are the alien, and what you're doing is isolating humans from one another so you can tear them apart limb from limb. And that game is okay. I'm like positive on that game, but I don't think I'm beat that game positive on it. Partially because I'm sort of like of two minds with it. For people who don't know, it is kind of a 2D Metroidvania-esque thing. And I say Metroidvania-esque because of some of the decisions that it makes around what sort of information it's willing to give you. And it's limiting that stuff in some ways because of the core theme and like setting of the game. So for instance, you're playing this big mass of blood and guts and limbs and tentacles and teeth, right? If that already sounds bad to you, you are not going to like this game, let me tell you. And in that game, you need to explore a facility, kill a bunch of humans, reconnect with other parts of your experimental body to get new abilities, and presumably eventually escape. I don't know. I have not figured out what the long-term thing is. I'm about a third, maybe half of the way through the game, based on looking at like a long play, video. One of the things it doesn't give you is a map, because why would your weird alien body have a map, right? That you can like scan the environment with a scream and like echolocate your way to checkpoints. You can echolocate your way to human body parts for you to devour. But what you cannot do is like pull up a map of the facility. So even though it is that sort of open, Castlevania Symphony of the Night style space where everything connects and you can go between different areas, and in fact you get abilities that you want to go back to previous areas to use, you can't ever pull up the entire world and be like, here is what I'm seeing. Or at least, again, not through halfway through the game can you do that. But even that is like less of the issue for me to some degree. I mean, the other thing that again is in theme with the game, but that I'm finding to maybe reduce my enjoyment of it is I'm not having a particularly challenging time because I'm an unbeatable super monster that devours everything in my path, and that is fine because it's such a unique experience. Most games like this, you're going to get into a boss fight and the boss is going to kick your ass and you're going to have to go grind a little bit, or you're going to have to figure out some new way of fighting that boss or whatever, and that's just not what this is. The bulk of the enemies you fight for the first 2 hours are just completely useless against you. You're this huge mass that is like flinging itself through these levels, and just basically touching them or grabbing them instantly wins you that fight. Eventually it introduces enemies that have kind of shields, like electro shields that will block your attacks and push you back and stun you, and then they can shoot you a little bit. But they're always in rooms where there is a duct you can move through, or some other way of getting around them, or you can use an ability to web them to the wall and then eat them, or whatever it is. And again, eventually they introduce new enemies that theoretically should be more difficult, but I haven't died once in this game. I haven't had a moment where I felt like I've been in a difficult position, like, how do I deal with this? They've even introduced tiny mechs to fight, and those were like, all right, I just pop the top off like it's a can of Pringles and eat what's inside. It's not that big of a deal. And I would say that that's also the case with the puzzles and traversal. There's some like unique mechanical interactions that have been fun in terms of like, how do I flood this area so I can turn into weird water worms, or how do I use my like possession ability to take control of someone to flip a lever or something. But it's all been fairly straightforward in a way that I don't get that nice buzz that you get in 2D like exploration. I don't get like the Hollow Knight buzz. In Hollow Knight, it was common that I'd be like, whoa, I figured this out. I know where I didn't know where I was going to go. I figured this out, and I did a cool jumping puzzle and blah blah blah. And again, part of that is moving the monster around is so simple. Like it glides across the screen. It's very easy to get from point A to point B. There's no jumping puzzles because you're just like clinging onto the background effectively. Like you're just flinging yourself everywhere constantly, and it doesn't have like a. When I say fling is probably the wrong word because fling suggests a sense of release and like uncontrol. If you fling a rubber band, it moves through the air and it doesn't get to control itself. But in this, you're constantly like connected to the walls around you in such a way that you're always in complete control. And I know that what it's going for then is this style of power fantasy. Like that is what it wants you to be, is this like unbeatable super monster for 5 or 6 hours. But I found I only could do that for a couple of hours before I started to get bored. There's some stuff with story mode, or not story mode, there's some stuff with like some story stuff that's kind of interesting. Every once in a while you go into a machine and see a flashback or a flash forward or a flash sideways into a human who is investigating a facility that has been infected. And that's neat. Like that stuff is kind of interesting to change perspectives and have to do human scale puzzles, I guess. But it's also it just hasn't been enough for me to sustain the length of game it is. Like I think if it was 2 hours, I would have beaten it. Or if it was 3 hours, I don't even know what I put into it. Let me just double check. But if it was only like an hour more than what I put into it, I would have put another hour in. I put 2 hours into it. So if it was 3 hours, I would have beaten it. But it's like 5 or 6, is from what I've heard, and that makes me think like, do I really want to stick it out? Which, again, maybe I'm just not the target audience. This does feel very much like a Patrick game. I think Patrick would probably wrap this up.
No. Patrick can also be very fussy about these types of games.
This is true. He is known.
It's tricky because that seems like it's a difficult challenge for a game to solve.
Yes.
Like the entire game is meant to feel like how a denouement feels like in most games, right? Where
yes.
like you've been given every tool, and now it is time to just put into practice like all the things you've mastered and all the abilities we've given you. Now you're just going to unload on this level. But if the entire game is that, then what you've created is a flat surface, right? Like the hill you're supposed to climb is now just a plateau that you travel across.
I should be clear.
That is a tricky thing.
There are upgrades to abilities. I think one of the smartest design ideas that it has is that your body can grow in scale 3 or 2 times, right? So you start with 5 health, then you jump up to 10 health, and you jump to 15 health. And at each of those jumps, you're getting a double, or you're an extra body mass. And your basic abilities change depending on which scale you're at, right? So your first level, at the tiniest level, you have this, like, you can shoot a web to web someone to the wall and prevent them from moving. At the second scale, that button does like a charge instead, and you can break through certain things or charge down enemies. And that means that there are puzzles built around that mechanic, right? It's like, oh, I need to give up some of my body mass, go smaller, be weaker, so that I can web this lever through a gateway that I can't break through, and then I can go back and get my body mass and then go back through